Welcome to another edition of Carnivore Bites. I'm your host, Jeff Sherman, along with Dr. Eric Lopkin. And as always, a very interesting week. We start out with our main actor on the stage, even though he's hardly ever on the stage, and that is the esteemed Joseph Biden. An interesting poll, Dr. Lopkin and our listeners, is that 58% of people, Americans, do not believe that he's actually in charge, and someone else is pulling the strings, including a third of Democrats. Find it interesting?
It is interesting. I find it amazing how the mainstream media has failed to report on this, but it's really not surprising that people are starting to believe this, because any question that says everything's been delegated, he doesn't show up and do regular press briefings. They're used to Trump, tweeting incessantly. Biden doesn't communicate with anybody, including, according to a lot of Republican senators, the Republican Party. So everybody seems to be isolated from him. You can't keep doing that and have people think he's really in charge.
Interesting point, Dr. Locke. We talk a lot about this on the show in terms of maybe the decline of traditional mainstream media. In spite of them not paying attention to this, it seems like Americans, either formulating their own opinion or getting it from alternative news networks or sources, I should say, it looks like they're coming to their own conclusions, not being led by MSNBC and CNN, among others.
Well, we talked last week about how the ratings for CNN and MSNBC have been in the toilet. Those people didn't just stop getting news, they went elsewhere. And between podcasts, alternative streaming networks, foreign press, the news is still getting out there, despite the fact that the mainstream media doesn't want to cover what's going on.
Interesting. So maybe we do, as we talked about before, are having a tidal shift in the way and how people get the news. Again, centering on the president, his efforts and push for a increase in taxes, both corporate and personal, is also losing steam. Not very surprising.
It's not surprising, and it's actually thanks to the actions of the extreme left that it's losing steam.
Exactly.
Because what happened was, for those listeners not following so closely, Biden and a bipartisan group of 22 senators came to an infrastructure agreement, a bipartisan one, and the Hamas caucus, or the squad, however Hamas you want to caucus, refer to them.
I like that. That's a good one.
And the people on the far left said they would not back a bipartisan bill unless it was also paired with this bill that they had proposed that repealed the Trump tax cuts. And they had no bipartisan support for that. They had almost no moderate support for that. So now, because they're pushing it, there are centrist groups, including a group called No Labels, that have been taking out national advertising, blasting them for not following through and agreeing to pass a bipartisan infrastructure bill. So their demands, they showed their cards, and basically the American people, moderate Democrats, and the entire Republican Party just went, no, we are done with you.
Well, maybe, do you have a bigger point? Is that maybe the Hamas / the squad, Hamas wing and the squad, is their shtick over? Or faded?
Well, I mean, it depends on what you mean by over. Are they giving up? Not by a long shot.
No, I didn't think that at all.
The more they talk, the more mainstream America is going, no, you know what? You are idiots. We need to get rid of you. And this is not just about the tax bill. This is about Rashida's calls to defund immigration. This is about the constant anti-Semitism that they've been shouting. The more they claim these ridiculous positions, the more the rest of the Democratic Party is shifting away from them. And in fact, they made a statement. I don't remember exactly which representative it was, but they made a statement just yesterday saying that Biden should go easy on China on human rights, because if we challenge China on human rights, they won't stop polluting with their factories and won't help us on climate change. So they have basically told the world that a non-existent agreement with China that China has no intention of following through on is more important to them than human rights.
Well, the climate change has become, for the radical left, a religion. It goes beyond any scientific indicators, any rational, arguments. It's even immigration is caused by illegal immigration is caused by climate change. I don't know how that happens, but whatever.
they blame climate change on terrorism is caused by climate change. Immigration, flooding, people coming in ridiculous numbers, caused by climate change. They blame climate change for everything. Now, let's make our position very clear. Is climate change real? Absolutely.
Yes.
The climate is changing. The science supports that. Is it the catastrophic emergency that the left wants you to believe? No. Why? Because guess what? Humans are adaptable. We will develop technologies. We already have CO2 scrubbers. People are actually working on how to get these CO2 scrubbers that were developed for the space program to place them on buildings and help limit climate change. We actually saw climate change retreat during COVID because factories closed down, cars were off the road. So we've actually seen it become less important, not more.
Well, you look at even in the car industry, an electric car was an anomaly. It was something, some woke person in suburbia would drive just to be cool and, and green. Now, not just because people want to do that, they're increasingly, and they will be a bigger part and bigger, and maybe the majority of cars sold in 5 years from now could be electric.
And that's another problem, because we've already seen the UN has put out a report. The construction and destruction of an electric car causes more environmental damage than having a gas guzzler on the road for 20 years. So while the left is pushing, we have to get electric cars to help climate change, they're actually helping to destroy the environment.
But they're the ones who always say science matters, but for their argument, it never does
only when it agrees with them.
Yeah, in fact, to shut down the United States economy when we're actually doing quite well in terms of reducing greenhouse gases. Yep. It's India and China, not that we don't have anywhere to improve. We do. They're the main culprits. You go to India, you can't even breathe. I had a friend who never smoked a day in his life, went to India 2 years ago, had to go to a pulmonary care doctor because his lungs were killing him.
Yeah, air pollution in India and China is off the charts. to the point that they actually have days where people have to wear masks just to breathe. But, this is not the first time the environmental movement has done this. And, the wackos on the left that embrace it, back in the the environmental movement is responsible for why we're in this mess now. Because in the 1970s, they said, oh, you can't use paper bags. We have to use plastic. Well, guess what? Plastic is manufactured using oil. They said, in the 80s, we can't support nuclear energy, which, by the way, is one of the cleanest energies that we have access to.
That's something that you need to even elaborate on. I had totally true. It was more in the late 70s. The no nukes, again, a bunch of entertainment whack jobs. Springsteen, the more I see him, I used to love him. I think he's maybe, let's just say, not the brightest bulb in the Christmas tree. But anyway, they had the no nukes. I had a friend of mine's father, and he said this years ago. If they didn't put the kibosh on nuclear, think of all the improvements that could have happened.
Yes.
Okay, and it is I'd rather live next to a nuclear power plant than a coal power plant. Hello, echo geniuses.
Yes, it's very clean, and of course, when you remind people that it's clean, the first thing they go is, well, what about nuclear waste? Well, France has been recycling nuclear waste into fuel for more than 30 years.
That's exactly what I'm getting to, is the technological advancements that could have happened. This is 40 years ago. We stopped all technological development in the United States and building of nuclear plants. Okay, what did we replace it with? It had to be replaced with something more. Coal plants continue to operate. It was more coal
plants, more oil plants, So the environmental movement is actually responsible for the mess we're in.
Well, it's always, these movements, big government. Look at the education department, started under Nixon in 1970, the Department of Education. We were in the top 5, whatever, industrialized countries in educational achievement in the early 70s. Now, we've talked about this before, even on our terrestrial radio show. We're essentially dead last in the industrialized world, correct?
Well, I actually saw statistics on this just this morning. We are actually improving in some cases. In English and science, I think in English we're ranked 16th, or communication 16th. In science, we're ranked 17th. But math, we are 32nd.
Okay. All I'd say is before the Department of Education, we were, in the top tier. We can debate the facts and figures. Every time government or big movements like the environment, it's always usually based on emotion and never really looks at the science. The whole no nukes movement started essentially because of a Jane Fonda movie called I forgot what it was.
The China Syndrome.
70s. Yes, China Syndrome.
Yes.
And then 3 Mile Island obviously didn't happen. Didn't help. That was, a real event.
It didn't help, but here's something that most people either forget or never knew. There were 0 fatalities at 3 Mile Island. None.
Well, you would never know that looking at the press at that time.
There have been 2 major nuclear accidents: Chernobyl and the Japanese plant that was hit by the tsunami. Other than that, there have been no major nuclear accidents.
Okay, and if you look at how many people have died from indirectly, obviously, from coal-fired plants, emphysema, lung cancer, COPD,
it's tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands. So we're using much dirtier forms of energy because the environmental movement didn't want to support clean energy.
Well, real quick on an issue of, we're talking about the squad in New York, Adams, don't recall his first name. It was
Eric Adams.
Yeah, had won the primary, and the article relates to the fact that there's it's a very short period of time, but there seems to be a growing trend of our moderates. I never would think I would ever say this, starting to take over their own party, because for every action there is a reaction. And is this happening? Is this possible?
It is starting to happen. Yes. Moderates in the Democratic Party are starting to exert their own kind of pressure. Why? Primarily because the wackos on the left said defund the police, and New York defunded police, Portland defunded police, Chicago defunded police, and guess what? Crime rates skyrocketed. Turns out having the police in minority neighborhoods was actually a good thing.
No, so but what you said, wait, real quick, I love what you just said, because isn't that quintessential to the whole liberal argument that Nancy Pelosi, Chuck Schumer, Blumenthal, they're so out of touch. They don't understand by defunding the police has little impact on them when they're living in a gated community. But the very people they so-called want to serve, they're getting crushed.
Yes. And in fact, one of the most progressive candidates in the New York mayoral election, I'm forgetting her name, but she actually campaigned on not just keeping the cuts that were already made to the police, but cutting another $6 million from the police. And of course, she has a private security force.
Oh, surprise, surprise.
Yes.
Very interesting. Well, on the political spectrum, there's a couple more little bits here. The Biden tax increases, both corporate and personal, seems to be fizzling.
Yeah, as we mentioned earlier, the left tried to tie that in, that they would not support a bipartisan infrastructure bill unless this bill also went through, and they wanted to force this through using budget reconciliation so that they could pass it with no Republican votes. And moderate Democrats went, you try that and you're not even going to have our support.
The reason I bring that up, though, doesn't it really point again to the fact that without having an active president, these things just kind of lose steam? You need to have someone championing it, and it's not going to be Kamala, and it's certainly not going to be Biden. Isn't that really the crux of this issue?
Well, every bill needs a champion. And Biden is right now putting his weight, as it is, behind the bipartisan infrastructure bill, leaving the squad to champion the tax hike and the Democrat-only bill. And at this point, politically, while they may be getting coverage from mainstream media and they may be all over social media, the squad has zero political clout. They have so far, since being in office, gotten a grand total of 0 bills passed.
Interesting. And then to wrap things up economically, Barry Dillard, he was a big executive at 2 major entertainment establishments, entertainment establishments, says that the days of the movie theater are over. That's no shock to any of us, is it?
Yeah, Barry Diller was the guiding force behind the USA Network when it started. He was the guiding force behind the Fox Network when it started. He's had a long history in the entertainment industry. And, you know, it really is true, because when you can go to Walmart and pick up a 70-inch television for about $400, people would rather do that and watch movies in the privacy of their own home on streaming than pay $50 for a family of 4 to go to the movies.
It was all the movies always used to be, you had your 25-inch TV, but you could go see Star Wars on the big screen. Well, the big screen is now in your house. You can stop it. If you want to take a break, you can go, eat anything you want. I don't see where the model for movie theaters remains
No, movie
relevant in
theaters.
any way.
Movie theaters have to start creating experiences. It can't just be about seeing a movie. Because again, the screen we can see on a big screen in our own homes now for actually a lot cheaper.
Agreed.
The exceptions to this is there's still going to be a market for IMAX movies.
Yes.
But they're going to need to step up. You're going to start seeing experiments with virtual reality. A number of years ago, they were pushing 3D, which didn't really work.
Yeah.
But they're going to have to find a new model and a new hook to get people in.
I wonder what else, and last on the agenda, speaking of getting people in, will there be anyone to work at these movie theaters? There's a report of a third of people in the hospitality industry quit their jobs because they're getting paid more to stay home.
Well, realistically, that's more of a problem for restaurants and retail stores than it is movie theaters.
Oh no, that's no. I agree with you 100%. I specifically did say in the hospitality area that you can't get anyone.
Yeah,
in fact, real quick, where I live in Avon, Connecticut, Whole Foods moved in, is building a whole complex around there. They've been delaying this. It's almost been delayed for almost a year. They had a job fair and 2 people showed up.
Yeah, there are a lot of fast food places that have not opened up their dining areas. They're doing drive-through only because they just don't have enough people to keep working. And of course, Biden's big answer to this was, well, you have to pay more. But there's a limit to that, because realistically, how many people are going to pay $12 for a Big Mac? And
it's 100%. Well, when you've been Joe Biden and you've been on the Beltway for 50 some odd years, you really don't understand the simplest economics, do you?
No, they really don't. And I mean, that's, very common, especially on the left, where these folks have never run businesses. Most of them have never had real jobs. They went from college into community activism, into political jobs, into office.
Isn't that one of the bigger issues in America? I mean, you always had clunkers in there. Ted Kennedy obviously is one of them. But you had John Kennedy served heroically in the military. You could say Ronald Reagan. Okay, yeah, he did have a career. He did even work as a corporate spokesperson. Obviously, you had Eisenhower, led the Allied assault on Germany. These people were accomplished individuals. I mean, Barack Obama, he went from college to basically street organizer. I mean, with the squad, these people never had even jobs.
Politicians at one point on both sides of the spectrum went into politics after having a successful career, either a corporate career, a legal career as attorneys, in many cases a military career. Now politician is the career, and they start out there, and because of that they have lost touch with the rest of America.
I agree, but in closing, didn't Dick Blumenthal serve in Vietnam? He's a war hero, isn't he?
Yes.
All right.
Dick Blumenthal, for those of our listeners that are not aware of Dick Blumenthal's military record,
stunning.
He did serve in the military. I believe he worked in supply or something. He never actually served overseas, but for years he lied about his service and claimed that he served in Vietnam when he never did.
If it was a Republican, what would have happened, Dr. Lopkin?
Oh, they'd have drummed him out. They'd have gone, oh my God, how could he lie about military service? And they'd have forced him out.
So that concludes another edition of Carnivore Bites, and we're available on many platforms, aren't we, Dr. Lopkin?
We are available everywhere where you can find podcasts. We are on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Stitcher, which is owned by SiriusXM. We are on Amazon Music, and we are now on Audible.
Very good. Well, we'll be back next week with another edition of Carnivore Bites. Thank you so much, Dr. Lopkin, and thank our listeners.
We'll see you then.
You've been listening to Carnivore Bites, part of the Exvadio Podcast Network. You can catch us every week on carnivoreradio.com, exvadio.com/podcasts, the Apple Podcast Store, Google Play, Spotify, iHeartRadio, and wherever you find podcasts.